Good evening, I'm Zinklea Samoa, and here's what we're talking about now tonight. The return of the state dinner. President Biden welcomes France's President Emmanuel Macron and his wife to the White House. More on what's on the menu tonight, including the diplomatic talks on the table and a potentially devastating rail strike averted. The Senate passes legislation brokered by the Biden administration, which now heads to the president's desk. But there are still some critics of the deal. We'll tell you why. Then Barack Obama is back on the campaign trail. We'll head to Georgia, where the former president is rallying for Senator Warnock. Plus, the mayor of New York announces a new plan to involuntarily hospitalize mentally ill people. We'll talk to a mental health professional on the pros and cons. And the future of sports. Lester Holt introduces us to the Sports Kid of the Year. We begin this hour with dinner. After a 3-year break, the White House is hosting its first official state dinner right now for French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife, Brigitte Macron. The two leaders just appeared for a photo op at the Grand Staircase moments ago. State dinners are a well-known political tradition in D.C. and a way of honoring visiting world leaders and their families. They have not happened in a while, though, because of the pandemic, which makes today's dinner extra special. And the menu alone speaks volumes. We're talking about Maine lobster, caviar, cheeses, enough to make all of our mouths water, even though I can't quite eat cheese, but that's okay. Biden and Macron did work up an appetite in the hours leading up to the dinner, holding a bilateral meeting in the Oval Office earlier this afternoon, followed by a joint press conference where the two countries' commitment to Ukraine took center stage.
I knew Russia was, but I didn't anticipate them being as brutal as they have been and what they've been doing. Today, we reaffirmed that, as I said, we're going to stand together against this brutality.
We will never urge the Ukrainians to make a compromise which will not be acceptable for them, because they are so brave and they defend precisely their lives, their nation, and our principles.
NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander joins me now. Peter, it's good to see you. So let's just jump in here. This state dinner is coming back after a 3-year hiatus, with the last one hosted by former President Trump for Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison. And President Trump also hosted a state dinner for Mr. Macron in 2018, which we know. So how is this state dinner, the first of the Biden presidency, different? And what message is he trying to send right now?
Well, we're already seeing some of the celebrities arriving. Jennifer Gardner, John Legend, Chrissy Teigen here this evening. President Biden is touting the unwavering partnership between the U.S. and America's oldest ally, France. That's who they're celebrating as they head into the state dinner this evening. And just to get your mouth watering here, Zinklea, they're going to be serving Maine lobster, California wine, and Oregon cheese. It is notable, though, that nearly 2 years have passed in the Biden presidency before that they hosted a night like this. With the pandemic now permitting, they'll have nearly 400 attendees here tonight. The tone, though, of this visit very different than when former President Trump hosted President Macron after leaving the Paris Climate Accord and repeatedly attacking the NATO alliance, of course. Today, the two leaders emphasized the places where they find agreement. Among them, their united front against Russia's war in Ukraine. Zinklea.
And that's an important point, Peter, right? This state visit comes at a time of tension in this pretty historic alliance between France and the U.S., specifically, though, related to Mr. Macron's disapproval of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's very much focused on U.S. domestic interests, America first, you could say. So how exactly is that impacting France and other international allies?
Well, the French president today really moderated some of his recent criticisms about this Inflation Reduction Act, which gives, among other things, some government money to help support U.S. clean energy programs, a move that Macron just yesterday said would fragment the West. President Biden tonight made no apologies about it. He did acknowledge France's concerns, saying that any glitches could be corrected. Mr. Macron called on the need for the U.S. and France to succeed together, emphasizing both countries have a shared vision for progress going forward. But I think that was a place of tension as they headed into today with that news conference where they each took questions from French and American reporters. But at the end of the day, it was one that both of them appeared interested in trying to push aside.
And of course, a big topic of discussion today, as you mentioned, was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Both sides agreeing and reaffirming their support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Do they fully, though, see eye to eye when it comes to Russia's invasion, or are there areas of disagreement?
You know, Zinkley, I think on this issue, the real news was made by President Biden today, who said that he has no plans to contact Vladimir Putin, but also expressed a willingness to meet with Putin if the Russian president demonstrates an interest in ending this war in Ukraine, something that the president says Putin has not done to this point. The French president, Emmanuel Macron, he's met with Putin on multiple occasions, as you know, since the war began. But President Biden has had no direct contact with Putin in that time. And he made clear again today that he wouldn't take that kind of a meeting with Putin on his own. If he were to do it, President Biden says it would happen only after he consulted with NATO allies. Sinclair.
Something to look out for. Hard-hitting topics over what sounds like a tasty dinner. NBC's Peter Alexander from the White House. Thank you, Peter. And staying in Washington, a rail strike, which could have been devastating, was avoided on Capitol Hill. The Senate voted overwhelmingly today to ratify the tentative deal between train companies and their workers. This is the same deal President Biden negotiated 2 months ago and has been pushing lawmakers to support. Among other things, it includes pay raises and more health benefits. One thing not included, though, paid sick leave, despite the objections of several rail unions. President Biden defended that decision earlier today.
I negotiated a contract no one else could negotiate. The only thing that was left out was whether or not it was paid leave. I'm going to continue to fight for paid leave for not only rail workers, but for all American workers.
NBC Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale joins me now. Ali, it's good to see you. So the paid sick leave issue was actually voted on separately as an amendment in the Senate and an entirely different bill in the House. So tell us how this all played out today.
Yeah, Zinkley, there's a reason that both the House and the Senate did it this way. It's because paid sick leave was one of the key sticking points on this agreement for progressive Democrats who wanted to see these workers get 7 days of paid sick leave instead of the 0 that they have now. It's why we saw them do it in 2 parts, though, because while it was almost assured that the actual deal to ratify the underlying agreement would be agreed upon both in the House and the Senate, it was less clear what would happen with paid leave, and that's why they did it separately. And ultimately, we saw how this shook out today. Several Democrats saying no on the underlying bill because it didn't include paid leave, but some interesting dynamics on the Republican side as a handful of Republicans actually voted for the amendment in the Senate that would have included paid leave. Of course, it wasn't enough, and that's why it failed.
Of course, and I mean, what are lawmakers telling you about national paid leave not being included in the deal? A lot of folks have been talking about this online.
Look, many of them are unhappy about it, especially when you come out of a pandemic. These are essential workers on the rails, and now they're saying that they won't have the 7 days of paid sick leave. This was why it in some ways crossed party lines, but there's also a question at this point of what this could mean if the issue is revisited in the coming months in the next Congress. We know that during Build Back Better, Democrats were trying to push through a national paid family and sick leave policy. That didn't manifest, but now when you see that there are 5 or 6 Republicans willing to vote for this, it does open the door potentially. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand was certainly thinking about that when we saw her after the vote. Listen.
Obviously, paid leave is essential to workers across America, and I think this vote was very instructive because 6 Republicans voted for paid leave for these rail workers. That means there's a willingness to, I think, work in the new Congress on a real national paid leave plan.
So we'll see if Gillibrand is right that there could be a new push for a standalone package on paid sick and family leave, or if this was just one of those moments where the circumstances lent themselves to Republicans getting on board for this effort, but not necessarily future ones.
Absolutely. Time will tell on that one. And Ali, I know this is not the first we've discussed of a rail strike, and I imagine it won't be the last. So what's next, and when will this deal land on the president's desk?
Look, as soon as possible, because Congress did something here that was pretty amazing for those of us who covered Congress, which is they acted very quickly. It just took them a matter of days to actually get on these bills, ratify the underlying agreement, and avert the railroad shutdown. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't a lot of reluctance on the part of Democrats, that they were perhaps undercutting unions' abilities to negotiate. But at the same time here, everyone agreed that this was a crisis that could not be stood if you were in the United States and impacted by what the economic fallout would have been of this strike. And so there was that agreement. President Biden's going to want to sign it as soon as possible. But at this point, crisis averted.
Important analysis. NBC's Ali Vitale. Thank you. And meanwhile, in Georgia, the Senate runoff election is just days away. Tonight, President Obama is out on the campaign trail in an effort to push Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock to victory and across the finish line. Democrats have already won control of the Senate, but President Obama says this election remains crucial.
An extra senator gives Democrats more breathing room on important bills. It prevents one person from holding up everything. And it also puts us in a better position a couple years from now when you've got another election, but the Senate map is going to be tilted in the favor of Republicans. And
joining us now live from Atlanta is NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. Vaughn, it's not lost on me that in contrast to what we just heard and saw, a former president trying to mobilize voters for a Democrat candidate, who exactly is stumping for Herschel Walker?
Not really many people. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, was coming out on Herschel Walker's behalf, but you're not seeing a former Republican president here. I think it's notable and speaks to where Georgia has gone politically, that it is a former Democratic president of the United States that is the one trying to galvanize voters here in the closing days of this runoff. Herschel Walker is making stops here around the state in these closing days, but for Democrats, they are eager to replicate what they did in 2020 and 2021. You'll recall that the runoff for Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock was actually a month later than this go around. That runoff took place on January 5th, but Democrats turned out in a greater share, particularly black voters too, turned out in greater shares than Republicans and white voters here in the state of Georgia in the runoff in 2021. And that's exactly why the former president, Barack Obama, said he's asking folks once again to do it again and to come back out there, because he said the successes and the achievements that Democrats were able to gain in Congress and sign into law by President Biden were only because of Georgia's efforts in that 2021 runoff. He said that they need them again this go around.
And Vaughn, we've seen a lot of Warnock, but where exactly has Herschel Walker been lately?
He's hitting a lot of these more rural places. He was in Marjorie Taylor Greene's hometown last night of Rome. He was in Dalton, Georgia yesterday as well. These are the types of conservative voters. When you look at the map here, you can see that this is the base of support that he needs to bring out. Frankly, Georgia, one could contend, is still very much of a conservative state. You saw Brian Kemp, the Republican governor, win his reelection quite handily against Democrat Stacey Abrams by 8 percentage points. And that is where you have seen a willingness of Georgians to vote for Republicans who just are not cozying up to the likes of Donald Trump, which Herschel Walker, in fact, did himself. And so that is where Herschel Walker is now actually trying to use the likes of Brian Kemp instead of Donald Trump. Brian Kemp has actually cut a television ad that is running across the state now, and he is trying to boost Herschel Walker's bid, suggesting that he would like to have a partner in the U.S. Senate who is a Republican vote instead of having 2 Democrats. And so he kind of, in a last-minute play here, is potentially could be a savior if, in fact, Herschel Walker were able to make up that difference with Raphael Warnock here in the runoff.
And, Vaughn, I'd be remiss not to talk about the news from the Daily Beast. It was pretty salacious. What exactly is going on with Walker today?
Right. This is a candidate, Herschel Walker, who is faced an onslaught of allegations from women who allege that he paid them to have abortions. His own son has alleged that his father threatened his family. You have heard from his ex-wife, who has said the same. And now the latest Daily Beast here report from reporter Roger Sullenberger outlines a woman who is on the record saying that from a 5-year romantic relationship she had beginning in 2005 with him, that there were multiple episodes in which he threatened her, and one particular episode in which he physically, in her words, attacked her, put his hand on her chest and her neck, and then swung his fist in the air in her direction. There were multiple women who spoke on background to the Daily Beast, according to this report, who outlined a history of Herschel Walker engaging in infidelity and actions that they said led them to believe that he was an unstable individual. Of course, these are, again, mounting allegations against Herschel Walker, but there's also the reality that he is just 5 days away from a competitive runoff and could very well beat the likes of the Democratic incumbent and gain a 6-year term to the U.S. Senate. Clay?
Disturbing allegations during a critical time. We'll be watching. NBC's Vaughn Hilliard. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Now, in case you haven't looked at your calendar, it's the first day of December and widespread snow, at least in the Pacific Northwest. Roughly 5 million people remain under winter alerts as the rough weather is expected to continue throughout the weekend. NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns is here to give us the latest. Bill, what's going on?
It was a snow day for the kids in Spokane. They had 10 inches of snow in Spokane.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. Just north of there in Lucerne, they had as much as 2 feet. So there was, some areas of Washington State, yes, if you love snow. I'm sure the kids were happy about it. Some of the teachers probably, too, getting the day off. So here's that storm. It has stopped snowing in much of Washington State, even in Idaho, a lot of it stopped. We did actually see some snowflakes, too, in the Seattle area. It wasn't enough to, accumulate and cause a lot of travel issues, which was nice. But that storm has shifted to the south, and we are getting nailed this evening in areas where I-80, like Donner Pass, heading from Sacramento to Reno up towards Lake Tahoe. The higher elevations are getting just nailed. And this is what we need. I mean, the rainy season, snowy season goes from November till about roughly almost May, and then it just shuts off and it's dry pretty much all summer. And we all know how bad the drought is. So this is, essential in the winter months to build up the snowpack. Then it will melt and go into the reservoirs. And this is great. A lot of rain, though, doesn't make for easy traveling throughout central portions of the state. And by the time we're all said and done, we have 2 storms. The one I just showed you, and then another one that we're going to deal with as we go through Friday, Saturday, lasting right into Sunday. This is a combination of both of them, how much moisture is going to fall. So that's even the snow melting and the liquid equivalent around 2 to 3 inches. So that's good. Some of the highest totals could maybe be up there around 5 to 6 inches. As far as snowfall goes, almost all of the mountain regions are going to get it. So if you have skiing plans, over Christmas break towards, January 1st, New Year's, this is gold. Mountains of Colorado from Steamboat to Aspen, the Vail, all the way down to Telluride is going to get it. The Wasatch Range here, Provo is going to get some good snow. Jackson Hole is also going to get a good 6 to 12 inches, but it's really the mountains of California and the Central Sierra. That's who has the best chance of getting the high totals. And about 6 million people are under winter storm warnings and advisories. It's mostly high elevations. If you're driving in the low elevations, you're just fine. Now, tomorrow, the other thing is that storm moves into the plains. We're going to have a high wind event. You don't be surprised this time tomorrow night we show you some pictures of 18-wheelers that tip over because we're going to have high wind warnings from New Mexico all the way through Colorado. Interstate 70 is going to be one of the worst spots. And here's how we time out that second storm. So by about 5 p.m. tomorrow, that storm's just off the Pacific Northwest coast. Windy, rainy conditions right along the coast. It's not until Friday night and Saturday that it moves to the south. It taps some moisture. Even L.A. north of there could get a little bit of rainfall. Not a high-impact storm like the one we're dealing with, but that one's going to stick with us right through the weekend. So here's your weekend forecast. Light rain event is going to head through the areas of the Northeast. Not really a high impact, just kind of ruins your Saturday outdoor plans. And then as we go through that storm that we just tracked on Friday, it's off the shore. Saturday, it moves a little closer onshore. And then by Sunday, that's when it really starts to cause some problems with heavy snow in the high elevations again, and also some rainy weather in areas of California. At this point, it doesn't look like Los Angeles is going to get significant rainfall, but any rain in LA is always a big deal. It'll just be a little bit. And notice after that rainy day on Saturday in the Northeast, sunny and cool but brisk weather for much of the eastern half of the country. So Clay, a high impact storm for the West. It's difficult to deal with, but we need it desperately. We need more of these storms all winter long.
It's always tough to balance, but sounds like we'll wear our coats this weekend.
Right.
Bill, thank you. And nearly 3 weeks after 4 University of Idaho students were murdered in their home, there is no suspect, there is no motive, but now there is mounting confusion after mixed messaging from local authorities. Police now reaffirming that the 4 students were indeed part of a, quote, targeted attack. Moscow police forced to clarify after authorities seemed to suggest the opposite last night. A police spokesperson telling NBC News, quote, "We remain consistent in our belief that this was indeed a targeted attack, but have not concluded if the target was the residence or its occupants." One of the victims' fathers spoke to Fox News about the confusion earlier today.
I don't like it one bit. And these guys are professionals. They sat in a room and this is what they came out with. And they keep coming out with statements that create more questions than the answer.
Joining us now from Moscow, Idaho, is NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky. Morgan, it's good to see you. So given the severity of this case, why are we getting the mixed messaging?
Yeah, that was a question I posed to a spokesman for Idaho State Police, Sinclair, and he said he wanted to clarify this ongoing discussion about the use of the word targeted, saying that they do believe this was a targeted attack, but it is still too early in this investigation to say whether or not the individuals inside were the target or if the house itself was targeted. They clarified this statement because a local prosecutor had stated that it may be the home that was targeted, causing a lot of confusion in this ongoing investigation. So as it stands right now, authorities are not saying that this is not a targeted attack, but rather it's still too early to say which target it exactly was.
I mean, definitely confusing. And Morgan, without a suspect in hand, how can law enforcement be making any assessments at all? What's the latest on the state of the investigation, especially given the severity of the crime?
Well, we know that Moscow police are working with the Idaho State Police and the FBI. This is a joint investigation going forward. Investigators tell me that they are making progress, but that the public needs to be aware that they are not able to share critical details at this point in time, and that is why they're calling on anyone in this community who was in that area to see if they have any potential evidence, digital evidence on their phones, or any information that they can share about retracing the final steps of those 4 young victims in the hours before they went back home. They said no matter how irrelevant it may seem, it may be crucial in piecing together this absolutely heartbreaking puzzle. But as for information coming out about the ongoing information that they're gathering, there is not a lot, and that is certainly leading to the frustration here in this community with, as you mentioned, no suspect, not even a person of interest named, and no murder weapon recovered other than the fact that investigators say it was a fixed blade knife. Sinclair?
And Morgan, you talked about the frustration in the community, and I know you joined us last night ahead of the vigil held at the University of Idaho. And we just heard from Kaylee Gonzalez's father. How are other victims' relatives and their peers responding to this uncertainty? What's the sentiment in the community right now?
They're certainly still absolutely heartbroken, and I think the lack of an arrest is compounding that, at least for right now. The parents, when they did speak out at that very somber vigil last night, made it very clear that they wanted to celebrate the lives of these 4 young students and not dwell on the tragic way in which they were taken. That said, these individuals, these family members of the victims, are calling for justice, and the vigil closed with a prayer, hoping that the people responsible for finding this individual, these individuals, have all the information they need to hold that person accountable. Sinclair?
Definitely keeping those families in that community in our prayers. Morgan Chesky, thank you.
Thank you.
And still ahead, crypto and Congress. An expert tells lawmakers it's time for crypto regulations, how to avoid a collapse like the one we just saw with FTX. And later this hour, a buzzer beater you have to see to believe. Now Tonight continues after this. Welcome back. I'm Zinklea Samoa. The stunning collapse of cryptocurrency exchange FTX has created a new push for crypto legislation. The Senate Agriculture, Nutrition and Forestry Committee held a hearing on the matter today. And Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow, a Democrat from Michigan, claims her bill would create the proper oversight.
The crisis created by FTX further confirms the need for a whole-of-government approach to regulating this market. The risks of trading crypto have come into sharp focus in the past few weeks, but we have known about them for years.
Testimony from the chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission urged lawmakers to institute a regulatory framework for crypto trading soon or else.
As I have stated publicly many times before, I strongly believe that we need to move quickly on a thoughtful regulatory approach to establish guardrails in these fast-growing markets of evolving risk, or they will remain an unsafe venture for customers and could present a growing risk to the broader financial system.
CNBC technology reporter Mackenzie Segolas joins me now. Is it truly possible for him to not foresee the way this all unfolded? Give us a rundown of exactly what happened and how he has been handling the situation.
So within days, FTX went from being one of the biggest crypto exchanges on the planet, worth $32 billion, to bankrupt. And it started in early November with leaked financials that eroded confidence in FTX and its sister company, a hedge fund called Alameda Research. And that scared customers who started pulling billions of dollars out of the exchange. And ultimately, Bankman-Fried just didn't have enough money in company coffers to meet all those withdrawal requests. Now, we later learned that SBF had moved a lot of money in customer funds to places that he shouldn't have, like to that hedge fund, Alameda. Now, SBF blamed FTX's collapse on things like poor risk management, telling Andrew Ross Sorkin that he was to blame for not watching over his empire closely enough, but that he didn't try to commit fraud, a distinction that he returned to repeatedly. You know, basically for the whole conversation, he downplayed his knowledge, which is a stark contrast to this carefully cultivated image of a crypto genius that he held just a month ago.
And you say a carefully cultivated image, and it's not lost on me that I imagine his lawyers probably don't want him talking. Is he speaking out against the advice of his lawyers? And do we think we'll see him testify in front of Congress?
Yeah, I mean, he's openly said that this directly goes against what he has heard from counsel and all of these public speeches that he's made as of late. In terms of whether we'll hear from him on Capitol Hill, today was the first of many planned hearings. The main one with the House Financial Services Committee kicks off on December 13th, where lawmakers are expected to call up the new FTX CEO, John Ray, possibly SBF himself. In the meantime, SBF is giving lawmakers, prosecutors, investigators a whole lot to work with. He was on Good Morning America. He had that Deal Book conference yesterday. And in the last month, he just hasn't been shy about giving these print interviews. And in each of those conversations, he keeps making that same basic defense, which is the classic bad businessman strategy. Essentially, I made a lot of mistakes, but I'm not a criminal because I didn't intend to do anything wrong.
Well, a lot of eyes on this one. CNBC's Mackenzie Sagalos, thank you so much.
Thanks.
And we turn now to some breaking news. There's been a setback for former President Trump involving those documents seized at Mar-a-Lago. A 3-judge panel of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled to end the special master review of the materials. You'll remember that's something Trump personally requested over the summer. The judges wrote in part, quote, "The law is clear. We cannot write a rule that allows any subject of a search warrant to block government investigations after the execution of the warrant. It remains unclear whether Trump will appeal the decision." And coming up, more of tonight's headlines, including why Biden's student loan forgiveness plan is heading to the Supreme Court. And recreational marijuana is now legal in one state. We'll tell you where. And still ahead, the road to the White House in 2024 may no longer begin in Iowa, where the Dems plan to caucus first, and why is ahead on Now Tonight. Don't go anywhere. It's time now for some of the headlines we're watching tonight. The Supreme Court delayed a decision today on Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Justices will now hear oral arguments in February. In the meantime, the debt relief program remains paused. After years of delays, Tesla's electric semi-trucks are finally out for delivery. Pepsi will be the first to get their hands on the all-electric 18-wheelers. This is Tesla's first expansion beyond the passenger vehicle market. If you live in Rhode Island and are over 21, you can now legally buy recreational cannabis. The state approved legislation for this back in May, but it finally took effect today. 5 hybrid stores were the first to welcome recreational sales in addition to medical marijuana. On Hawaii's Big Island, lava from the Mauna Loa volcano is still flowing. Officials there say it slowed down significantly. If the lava continues at its current pace, though, it could still flow onto a crucial highway by next week. And in Boston today, Prince William and Kate continue their stateside trip. The couple in Boston to present the Earthshot Prize Awards tomorrow for innovation on environmental issues. The trip, however, has largely been overshadowed by the resignation of the prince's godmother. She reportedly made racist comments this week to a black woman who was at Buckingham Palace as part of a reception. The royals are expected to meet with President Biden tomorrow. Closing arguments began today in the tax fraud trial of the Trump Organization. The company is accused of a sweeping 15-year scheme to allegedly compensate top executives off the books. Former President Trump himself is not facing any criminal charges here, but the extent to which he was aware of this alleged scheme is still unclear. Investigative correspondent Tom Winter has the latest.
closing arguments today in the trial against the Trump Organization, the former president's business based here in New York City, and on trial for its alleged role in a tax scheme with its CFO, Allen Weisselberg. And he was the main name and character brought up in these closing arguments today by both the defense and prosecution. The defense going first, saying, look, this is all about, in their words, Allen Weisselberg's greed. This is somebody who wanted to enrich himself. He had the opportunity to get all of these perks as the result of his work for the Trump Organization: apartments, luxury cars, even school tuition for his grandkids, but he didn't pay the taxes on it, and they say that's on him. In the stopgap for the Trump Organization, its tax preparer who testified at this case, Donald Bender, as well as its company, who they paid $2.5 million to a year to make sure they were on the right side of the law, they didn't have their back either. This is not something, they said, that involves the former president or his family. This is one man's greed and the greed of others in the organization. The prosecution, in its closing arguments today, say, no, not so fast. The law says that somebody needs to be in a high managerial position. And who could be more in that position than the Trump Organization CFO? And that, in fact, this was for the benefit of the Trump Organization. Several $100,000, not only in Medicare payroll tax payments that didn't have to be paid by the Trump Organization, but also in raises they didn't have to give their employees because they were getting all of these tax-free perks. At the end of the day, after the jury left, perhaps a key development in that the defense wanted the discussions of the former president and his family stopped by the prosecution in their closing arguments. The prosecution said, not so fast. You brought up the former president in your closing arguments. We're allowed to address that and whether or not he may have known about this. Now, the former president, Donald Trump, is not charged in this case. He's not going to go to jail even if the Trump Organization is convicted, but we'll just have to see how much the former president plays a role as the closing arguments continue tomorrow.
Thanks to Tom for that report. And turning to New York City, earlier this week, Mayor Eric Adams announced a new plan to allow for the involuntary hospitalization for individuals dealing with mental illness in the city. The plan would allow police and first responders to remove them from the streets and subways. Officials then can take these individuals to nearby hospitals, even if they pose no threat to others. The mayor's office says the plan is in response to the city's mental health crisis.
These New Yorkers and hundreds of others like them are in urgent need of treatment, yet often refusing when offered. The very nature of their illnesses keeps them from realizing they need intervention and support.
But some advocates for the houseless are condemning the announcement, calling it a, quote, reliance on ineffective surveillance, policing, and involuntary transport and treatment of people with mental illness. Joining us to talk about what this means is psychotherapist and award-winning reporter, Dr. Robbie Ludwig. Thank you so much for being here. This is so important.
Thank you for having me. I agree with you.
Yeah, and so I wanted to ask you, first and foremost, how are mental health professionals responding to this?
Well, I think there's an appreciation that Mayor Adams is not looking the other way and realizing that there is a mental health crisis and there is a problem with homelessness, and he's trying to address it. So there's an appreciation of that. Whether this will work or not, I think that there needs to be an expanded idea of how we handle this situation.
And so on that, what concerns are folks expressing when it comes to this new plan?
Well, first of all, people who are mentally ill have rights, so you can't take away their civil liberties. If they're not a danger to themselves or others, and you hospitalize them, they could walk out right away, or let's say they are treated, they have to, they can only really stay there for 72 hours, and then where do they go? So this is really a housing issue and treatment accessibility. You know, if you're going to bring them into the hospital, it's just going to be a revolving door, which we've seen before.
And I think the part that raises eyebrows is the involuntary hospitalization.
Yes.
How effective is that practically?
Well, it's effective for 72 hours, but after that, not so much, because people go out, and if they have no home, they're going back onto the streets. If they don't have mental health professionals and access to it, then they have no way to have ongoing care. So I think the problem will highlight that the mentally ill homeless have no place to go, and that we need to find them housing, we need to find them treatment, so that they can maintain a healthy lifestyle, or healthier.
And I mean, you're touching on the fact that this is not necessarily a sustainable long-term solution, right? We're talking about a lot of problems, a lot of issues. So then I'm sure the experts and the people watching are wondering, what's the solution? What would be a better alternative if not this?
Well, this is a start. And I think what's great about Mayor Adams is that when you look at the homeless, it's easy to get hopeless and to give up on the situation. So at least he wants to address it. But we need more housing. We need more treatment available within the housing. And we need it accessible for these people. And so that will be an expense, and that will be more of a political issue. How do you create housing for this population in order to get them off the streets and to get them the treatment that they need, and perhaps help them be productive to society?
And I mean, it sounds like you're touching on the fact that this has more to do, it's more than just mental health, right? There are multiple factors that are contributing to this. If someone's watching and it's like, what do I do if I encounter someone dealing with a mental illness or crisis who is houseless? What would you say to them?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, it's a good question. Are there caseworkers maybe that can be assigned to them? And where is their housing currently that maybe they can get access to? But that's a process, and it's complicated, and one that usually homeless people can't do on their own. So it requires people who are knowledgeable about what is available in the city.
Absolutely.
For these folks.
Well, these are really important insights. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about it. Today, Chinese officials say they are moving to ease its strict zero-COVID mandates, a decision that comes after days of broad-based nationwide protest, the kind China seldom sees. NBC's Kelly Kobiella has more.
Well, Chinese authorities have signaled that they may be reversing their zero COVID policy. There are hints that some quarantine and testing rules will be relaxed, and the government could be about to roll out a massive vaccine push for its older population. This comes after those unprecedented protests across the country demanding an end to lockdowns, and also, in some cases, demanding more political freedom. China's zero COVID policy involves sometimes daily testing, mass lockdowns, and severe quarantines in hotels or camps. Already, Beijing has said that daily testing is no longer required for the elderly or for people who work from home. Other cities have made similar moves, and lockdowns in some cities have been lifted. This, again, could be a sign that China is moving away from zero COVID. If so, it would be a major reversal for the Chinese leadership.
That's NBC's Kelly Kobiella. Thank you so much, Kelly. And now to a problem many women are way too familiar with. Period products are just so expensive. I met with 3 teens in Virginia that are working to provide their community with these much-needed products for free. Take a look.
Our period pantry supplies free pads and tampons to our community.
An unremarkable errand, buying tampons, led Ariana Gala to a remarkable idea.
I picked up like a box of tampons, and I just told her, I was like, this is so expensive.
The 14-year-old recruiting her 2 friends, Ramsey Warner and Isabel Busher, to launch a free period pantry outside a church in Vienna, Virginia.
The pantry empties out pretty quickly, which shows how much of the need there is for the products.
We've gotten a lot of donations and support that way, and we've also been surprised by how much it's been used by the community.
Since September, the friends filling this 2.5-foot tall wooden cabinet with donated pads and tampons.
It hit home for us because we are girls and we know how important they are. I'm trying to, buy more things with my own money, but it's crazy that switching to buying my own pads and tampons would be such a big financial thing.
And it's a challenge many face.
Period poverty is the inability to purchase menstrual products in order to manage a period.
Jennifer Gaines of the Alliance for Period Supply says period poverty is widespread across the U.S., uniquely affecting low-income and marginalized communities and access to education.
students who don't have access to these products will miss out on school.
1 in 5 teens say they have trouble affording period products, and 4 in 5 students say they've missed class or know someone who did because of it, according to a study sponsored by Thinks and nonprofit Period. Adding to the hefty price for a box of tampons, state sales tax. 22 states in the U.S. still charge a sales tax on menstrual products. Activists are pushing for a 0% tampon tax rate, but some lawmakers take issue with the idea. A 2021 bill to scrap Wyoming's tax on menstrual products failing after lawmakers argued all, quote, hygiene items should be included. State Senator Tom James telling the Casper Star Tribune, quote, it segregates and favors one sex over another. 17 states and Washington, D.C. have laws requiring free period products in schools, 2 of those requiring them in homeless shelters. Abroad, New Zealand and the city of Seoul offer school period products for free. Scotland making history in September, becoming the first country to provide free period products to everyone.
They definitely modeled, what we can do here in the United States. And so we can't stop having this conversation by just ending the tampon tax.
Far from policy debates, Ariana, Ramsey, and Isabel are making an impact where they can, hoping period pantries will expand.
We hope our project will spread awareness about period poverty and inspire other people to take their own steps.
Zinklea Samoa, NBC News. Important work there. And coming up, the Iowa caucuses were always a crucial first stop for presidential candidates, but maybe not in 2024. We'll tell you where the new starting line could be. Now get this, for more than half a century now, Iowa has been the first state in the country to cast its vote for president. But that may change in 2024, at least for Democrats. For some time, the Democratic National Committee has faced pressure from party insiders to diversify the first states that kick off the Democratic nomination process, specifically Iowa and New Hampshire. The question now becomes which state could leapfrog Iowa. A White House senior official tells NBC News that, safe to say, Michigan is President Joe Biden's preference. Joining us now to talk about this is senior national political reporter for NBC News Digital, Jonathan Allen. It's so good to see you. So let's jump in. What is the case for Iowa losing the top spot for presidential primary or caucus?
Well, the first thing about Iowa is that it's almost all white, and the Democratic Party is racially diverse. Iowa does not necessarily reflect the balance of urban, suburban, and rural areas that exist in other states where Democrats might have early primaries. And of course, Iowa is a Republican state, not one that is particularly competitive in recent presidential elections, meaning that the nominees of Iowa might not be able to go on as far in the future. Of course, we've just learned really in the last hour or so that the president has made a recommendation to the DNC's Rules and Bylaws Committee to put South Carolina first, and then follow that up with New Hampshire and Nevada on the same day, Nevada, I should say, then Georgia, then Michigan. So Michigan, as we reported, going to be in the early window for the first time. If the Rules and Bylaws Committee blesses what the president has told them to do, and most of those members were put there by him, and then the full DNC signs off on it. But could be a big fight before that happens.
A big fight, and I heard you mention South Carolina. Could the other 3 states in the top 4, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina, lose their top spots also?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility because the president has pressed for these states, Nevada, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, to stay in what is now a top 5. It seems likely that they will all be able to do that. Of course, the addition there of Georgia and Michigan on that early 5 win primary map as Biden would have it. I think what you're really going to look at here is how hard does New Hampshire fight this? What other allies might it have? South Carolina does not. It meets some of the criteria that the president and the party had laid out for an early state in terms of certainly it has a huge African-American population, and so it reaches that diversity threshold that the president was talking about. But it does not really meet the competitiveness in a battleground state criteria, which is something else he had talked about. South Carolina, of course, in general elections goes exclusively to Republicans. But what it does do is put a huge fortress in the path of anybody who might think that they could be a rival to Joe Biden for the Democratic primary nomination in 2020. South Carolina, as you'll recall, was his big touchstone state where he turned his campaign around, leading to his victory in the primary. And so now he's saying to the rest of the Democrats, if you want to come get me, if you want to beat me, you got to come through me in South Carolina on essentially my home political turf.
And you made important points there about the diversity, too, right? Because the country's demographics are changing and the politics maybe should reflect that. And I also know right now Michigan and Minnesota are leading contenders to be the first in the nation. So can you just quickly walk us through the pros and cons of each of those?
Sure, and they're not terribly different. They are both relatively competitive in general elections at the presidential level. I mean, Minnesota's a little less competitive. Minnesota, of course, has one big metropolis or two twin cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. Michigan, of course, with Detroit as its main metropolis. There are some similarities between them. Again, as I was talking about before, big urban areas, significant suburbs, and a whole lot of rural turf. And so there's that sort of geographical balance, within each of those states, which I think was interesting to the president, to his party. Michigan, of course, has had a special place in the lore of presidential politics since, Democrats became Reagan Republicans in the 1980s. And so, I think Michigan just had an inside track for a lot of reasons, including having some supporters on the Rules and Bylaws Committee and, President Biden having a real affinity for that state. So, if he gets his way, Michigan will be one of the early states and Minnesota will not. But again, there's still a fight to be had over that.
Yeah, Jonathan, I got to ask, how will this affect the timeline for the Republican contests?
Such a great question, because in some of these states, there may be some need for state legislatures to change around primary dates. And of course, in order to do that, usually you have to have control of both chambers of your state legislature and the governor's office, or cut some sort of deal. The Democrats don't immediately affect the Republicans, but some of what the Democrats are doing could have an effect on what Republicans do. In New Hampshire, for example, there is a law that says that New Hampshire primary has to be the first primary. And it has to be 7 days before any other primary. And of course, the recommendation that Biden has made is that New Hampshire would not be the first primary, that South Carolina would be, and that New Hampshire would share a date with Nevada. So, as a result of that, New Hampshire has to decide whether they are going to basically tell the president to shove it and go ahead and put their primary date earlier than South Carolina, or not do that. But Republicans in that state are likely to be in favor of any plan that keeps New Hampshire first.
Well, we know you'll keep us posted. NBC's Jonathan Allen, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And up next, we'll introduce you to a kid who calls his autism his superpower. NBC's Lester Holt tells us how it led to him being named Sports Illustrated 2022 Sports Kid of the Year. That's next. Okay, so a young golfer is this year's Sports Illustrated Sports Kid of the Year. But for 11-year-old Carter Bonus, golf is so much more than a game. Here's Lester Holt.
The game of golf teed up a new world for 11-year-old Carter Bonus.
The first experience playing golf was really amazing, and I just like hitting the golf ball.
Before he started playing, Carter was struggling. He says he was bullied at school and having trouble engaging socially. Carter has a form of autism.
Carter's type of autism is high-functioning Asperger's. He is able to communicate, but his social skills are not where they should be.
Medical experts say some kids with Asperger's tend to focus all of their energy on one thing at a time. Carter used that to his advantage on the golf course.
Golf definitely helped me with my anger management, and when I had a bad day, I would just go to the golf course, and that made me feel nice.
Golf really did save his life, because now he had something to look forward to, something that he was good at.
Carter was just named Sports Kid of the Year. He hopes to one day play in the PGA and has his own clothing line. Part of the proceeds, Carter donates to an organization that helps families and children with autism.
It feels amazing that I can help other kids, because I really want to help other people if they need help.
a young role model hoping to inspire other kids just like him.
And I will continue to be a good advocate and telling people to stay positive.
So inspiring. Stay positive. NBC's Lester Holt reporting. Thank you. And before we go, the headlines are not always grim, but you might not know it from watching the news. So here are your 60 seconds of joy. One middle school basketball player from Milton Pope in Illinois sank an incredible full court buzzer beater. That one shot gave them the win against their hometown rivals. Just goes to show you it ain't over till it's over. In Qatar, one ordinary World Cup game turned historic when Stephanie Frappart stepped onto the field today. That's because she is the first woman to lead referee a men's World Cup game. She also led the game's first refereeing crew, which was made up of all women, in the words of Beyonce, who run the world, okay? And 4 lion cubs have been rescued from Ukraine. They survived drone attacks and bombings before the trek to the U.S. Now the young cubs will have a new home in Minnesota, a wildlife sanctuary. Well, that does it for us. Thanks for ending your night right. I'm Zinklea Samoa for NBC News Now tonight. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.